Good morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started today so that we can get you out of here on time. Our numbers are a little few this morning, but I know the weather's been kind of crazy, and I appreciate all of you being here. Where's the clicker? For those of you that, this is the Adobe Connect, for those of you that are on Connect, again, it's the same thing that we've always had. So we have quite a big agenda this morning that we'd like to get through with you. A lot of what we're giving you today is informational, and we want to make sure that any questions that you have, please feel free to stop at any time and ask us some questions. We're going to talk about, Dr. Nye is here today. He's going to talk about the what's going on up at the legislature with us. He's been up there every day and trying to keep a lid on things. We're going to talk a little bit about an assessment inventory, testing in Utah, our assessment to achievement update, range finding access, SAGE updates, the data exchange in DLM, a math update, EFSA, data gateway update. So we've got quite a bit to get through this morning, and so let's just go ahead and get started. We want to make sure that you know these are the future AD meetings, March 17th, April 21st, May 19th, and June 16th will take us through the end of the year. So just make sure that you have those on your calendar. Question? We sent, yeah, Tori, you.
I realize it's coming on being repeated, but when it just looks like a revision of the previous message, that's not really noticeable.
I think we've sent those multiple times, and if the subject line says AD memo, that's typically, you need to open them and read. Okay, we'll work on that. All right. Rich, do you want to go ahead and talk to us a little bit about the AD, about the bills that are up on the Hill right now, and giving us an update about what's happening up at the legislature? You don't have to talk about those in order. You can talk about everyone.
All right. We have, well, welcome everyone. Rich Nye, Associate Superintendent of Data Assessment, Accountability, IT. Anyway, just like all of you, wear several hats. So certainly good to be with you this morning, and a lot of familiar faces. So this is good company. Just as the legislative session is underway, a lot of changes. Things are busy, and it changes from moment to moment. And for those of you that are looking for some things to do, I would strongly suggest getting on the legislative website and signing up for legislative updates, right, for bills. How many are very, very comfortable with looking those up and following and tracking bills? See hands. How many would like to see really quickly how one might do that? It's okay if you don't. I mean, it's all right. It's your time, and I don't want to waste it. Not a lot of hands there. The reason I suggest that, maybe I should go with the why before the what, but the reason I do that is there's a lot of bills that affect public education, and not only just assessment, and several of you wear several different other hats in your districts, and of course you have colleagues in your districts that may be interested in some of these bills. In working with the legislators, it's become very apparent that they need, and for most of them, they crave feedback on their bills. Okay? And sometimes the only people that are hearing from are maybe a very vocal minority. And so they want to hear perhaps another side of the story to what their bill does, consequences and unintended consequences. So I would encourage you to reach out early and often to your legislators, to all the legislators, when it comes to bills that potentially affect the work that you do, and of course affect the work that occurs in the classroom in educating our students. So just a few here that pertain to this group primarily. Let's go in kind of a reverse order. let's take a look at HB 164, Educational Testing Amendments. This was heard before the House Ed Committee, the Standing House Ed Committee this week, and it was shot down. What this bill essentially did was allow teachers the opportunity to choose whether or not to use SAGE results as part of a student's grade. As you know, last year, the verbiage in that bill was changed to say a teacher may not use SAGE results in students' grades, which, of course, the unintended consequences of that was, particularly among secondary students, was what? Okay, tell me again why I should take this test, right? And so we saw a lot of clicking and whatever, and no one really caring about that. Here's the ripple effect, right? So there's accountability provisions, teacher evaluations, a lot writing on how students do on these tests, with all these other bills that are intertwined with this. And so what this one did was to say and take the may not and strike the not to a teacher may use that. With that, as you know, with opting out, what this, as the current statute says, they can opt out of every state and federally mandated assessment. Got that. They also may opt out of any software or system platform that is provided by the state, right? So kind of limiting there. And so it was going to strike that as well. And it was going to, the bill was going to allow for teachers to incentivize students to take the test. And that would have been determined by board rule. In doing that, there was some fear from some legislators saying, well, we're going to be punishing kids when their parents decide to opt them out. No, the bill says you can't do that either, right? This was more than just your root beer and pizza parties if you take the test kind of incentive, right? This wasn't that. It was certainly pedagogical based, or at least that was the intention, that a teacher and a student could sit down together with their parents, identify where they were at the beginning of the year, and set some targets and goals, and then reward the student, right, for having achieved those goals, or at least track that progress, incentivize the children, have a child, right, take ownership in the learning progression throughout the year. That was the intent. There is hope for HB 164. Working with Representative Powell, the sponsor on it, and Senator Milner, the fourth sponsor on that, anyway, from the Senate, to revive it, right? It was a 6-6 and went and turned to a 5-7 vote against, but they may strike a lot of things, and it looks like, right, okay, getting ahead of it a little bit, it looks like there's appetite in that House Ed Committee to make it a one-word bill, to get back to the teachers may use SAGE assessments for grading, right, to at least get to that point. And here's politics, right? Granted, we had all that other stuff as well, but if we can at least just get that and honor teachers in the profession to make these types of decisions and help incentivize students to do well on their tests, hopefully that will come. So we'll see, though. We'll see this hopefully tomorrow, maybe on the agenda in that committee, or early next week. Yeah.
And then a student chose to opt out, would that negatively impact their grade?
No, so it can't, right, based on the law. But what you'll see with that is, rather than if a student opts out of the state or federally mandated assessment, then the teacher may supplement that assessment with one of their own creation based on standards that is not more rigorous. We use that word a lot, and sometimes I think it loses its definition, than the state assessment, right? So they still have to demonstrate some proficiency in what they've learned during the year. Any other questions on the HB 164? Okay. Let's take a look at HB 358, Student Privacy Amendments. Take a look at this. How many remember this from last year, Student Privacy Amendments? Yay, all right, a few. Okay, this is about 3 years in the making, right? So this is Representative Andrick, and so you can imagine this is addressing a concern about student privacy rights, protecting that. Third-party vendors that have access to personally identifiable information are the safeguards there for student privacy, right? Breach insurance, things like that. This also, and I would encourage you to look at it carefully with your board members, right, and superintendents to say, all right, how does this impact our district? And then give that feedback. more than happy to take it. But if you want to contact Representative Vandreg specifically on that, I can't overstate this, he really wants feedback, right? Most legislators do. So if you take a look at student privacy amendments, what it basically does is breaks down student privacy data into 3 buckets, for lack of a better word. One is the type of data we need to conduct the business of education, right, of our students. It's required. A student can't be in the system without providing some level of personally identifiable information. Okay, so it lists all those types of things and what those might be. The second bucket are optional student data. Anytime a student opts in to services provided in the public education system, they have to provide more data. A case in point would be free and reduced lunch. If they want to participate in that program, right, they need to provide some more student data, and it lists those types of things. Football. Student plays football, there's some roster information you're just going to have to give up, height, weight, right, things like that, in order to play the game. Physical information, right, get a doctor's clearance, things like that. You get the idea. Those are all the optional things. The last one is prohibited, the last bucket. Things that we are not allowed to systematically collect or store regarding students' personally identifiable information or history. Now, the case in point is a student visits with a counselor, reveals some information. It is in the best health and the interest of the child that the counselor has that information. There's some legal obligations to have some information. It's not talking about that. It's about talking and putting it in some systems warehouse, right, that gets uploaded somewhere to something that follows a student forever and ever and ever. So that's student privacy amendments. It's really getting at protecting student data privacy. This goes into biometrics collection. You know, does anyone use the fingerprint scanners for lunch? So fingerprint it's awesome, first of all. You know, you don't have to remember the names, but that's a biometric identifier, right, is those fingerprints. This bill wants to be very careful that it doesn't preclude the use of future technologies to do business, but it wants to set those guardrails in place so it's not abused. That's essentially what it comes down to on that. School grading and modifications. This went before the Senate Ed Committee yesterday and the day before. There's kind of this optical problem that legislators are having right now with the scale used to determine grades. Surprise, right? When the bills grading Utah schools first came out, it was 80 to 100% was an A, right? Remember that? And then it breaks down from there. Visually, under the CRTs, yep. So under the CRTs, that's what the breakdown was. And visually, people can resonate with that, right? You get a 90%, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. It's intuitive, right, based on our educational experience and in the classrooms. That's an A, typically, right? With the move to SAGE, and you know, we can't compare CRT and SAGE, right? Nor should the Grading Utah Schools use the same metric to calculate those two. Anyway, it was lowered to where 62%, 64%, yeah, that's right, 64% to 100 was an A. So that was a provision made, an exemption last year to school grades with a somewhat familiar distribution as to the year before of those grades across the schools. And what it essentially allowed is to have just about as many A's as was the year before with CRTs, and B's and C's, and you get so forth. The distribution was roughly kept the same. Psychometrically or statistically, you know, you want to be very careful with that, right? However, and this is where it's come full speed, what Senator Milner wanted to do and President Niederhauser wants to do was to say, okay, we need some flexibility in school grades, just enough to where, because it's in statute, it makes it very difficult for it to be fluid or dynamic or to be able to change quickly, as evidenced by the move from CRT to SAGE. Obviously, they're presenting another bill. Essentially, what their hope is, and working with Senator Milner on this, so I gave her some statistical comparisons and what this might look like, but also she's trying to meet, and rightfully so, she's trying to meet that optical or that aesthetic interpretation a little bit more, and working with legislators on her end. She's been working with legislators. They're like, okay, you know what? we've got a lot of balls up in the air. There's a lot of variables at play here. What if where we're at the 64% this year, rather than putting that in statute, let's let the board, State Board of Education, determine what those percentages look like, with the understanding what we want to capture in statute, President Niederhauser and Senator Miller, is a 2% increase or an expectation of 2% growth every year until we reach, we find out where that ceiling or that plateau is, right, in school grades. Now, the question has to be begged, and it's been said, who was the anthropologist? Anyway, if you want to measure change, don't change the measure, right? We've heard this. And so it changes that, right? There's pros and cons to doing it this way. Having talked with Senator Milner, though, ESSA, okay, 5 indicators, right, for a state's accountability system. And what's encouraging about that is, school grades and SAFAR and all those things. They cover about 3 of those. Well, SAFAR even goes so forth as, proficiency growth, some alternate measure. ELL is a provision, and then we have that fifth indicator of school quality. Some are calling it the unicorn indicator. I call it the mythical beast indicator. We're not sure exactly what that looks like yet for a state and an accountability system. We're not sure. Okay, I don't think the regulations, as they're going to be written, are going to give us as much or even enough information to say with certainty this is what we're going to do. But at least those are 5 areas. And talking with Senator Milner about that and President Niederhauser, they are open during the interim after this legislative session for this new year to explore what perhaps one accountability system would look like in the state. And we're going to work to that end, right? We're going to work to that end. And so what I see here with SB 149 is, yes, it's going to address issues like increasing the expectation for our students to improve. That's fine. That's great. It also meets the needs for those looking at it saying, well, when I was in school, 66% was never an A, right? Well, college, sometimes you get that curve, and it very well could be. But anyway, it was very important to them, as I think it's important to us. Some legislators wanted us to norm the school grades. Working with superintendents on that, what becomes the issue? Someone's got to fail, right? Someone's got to fail. Where really we want to keep it, and that's the hope, is keep it criterion reference to where, you know what, if I meet the criteria, I get the grade. Fair enough, right? We get that. We understand that. Let's see. SB 200, SB 201, these are Representative Polson's bills. Because they're 200, 201. 200 actually deals with 11th graders, or is it 201? All right, I was right. Thanks, David. I was right the first time. SB 200 would allow, and this was before the House Standing Committee this week, and it was passed unanimously, so it's heading to the floor. But it would allow 11th graders, or LEAs, to choose whether or not to have their students take SAGE, 11th graders taking SAGE, in lieu of ACT, right? So students could take ACT, 11th graders obviously could take ACT and not have to take SAGE. That's essentially the premise of the bill. Lots of pros and cons on this one. I encourage you to work with your superintendents and your board to determine where you're at on it, and then reach out to your legislators and let them know. Talking with LEA statewide, I'm kind of getting a 50-50 split, right? Some are saying, absolutely, let's do it. Others are saying, well, time out. I'm not sure I want to go there. ACT, while it does provide good information, isn't aligned to the standards, Utah State's, state of Utah standards. We can't measure growth on that, so yeah, then it affects accountability. I mean, there's a ripple effect. Anytime we change something in one bill, it's going to affect about 3 others. Yeah.
I know this is getting the cart before the horse, but if they do HB 200 and then want us to get up to 90% or 2% increase in the school grades, and we match those 2 bills together, I mean, ACT is where we all lose our points. I mean, we're at 25, 30%, something like that of our kids who are getting all 4 levels. And that's just going to decrease the grades, not increase the grades. It's going to drop it down to 50% instead of 66% to get an A, except for now we have to get 90. And I don't know.
I'm right there with you. So in looking at in terms of ACT, and we had that conversation. I think we're going to have that conversation more. Talking with, I'm pointing to Dr. Phillips here because your accountability, everything, right? And so just had a conversation with Senator Milner yesterday about this, and explored different options for calculating what does it mean to be college and career ready, right? So currently under what's in statute, which is very prescriptive, what's in statute is just as you said, a student has to meet benchmark as determined by ACT in all 4 reporting categories in order to be considered college and career ready. Then you get a point. And what's the average for the state?
38%.
38 points out of 150, right? 38 points out of 150, right? So we start looking at that going, well, we don't want to be guilty of grade inflation. I mean, numbers are numbers. You know how I feel about that. Numbers are numbers. And I do love numbers, but either we front load the numbers on the one end or we back load the numbers on the other, but are we reporting what we hope to report? And so there's several discussions that we're having to determine what flexibility, and pitched with Senator Milner. You know, what if we did 1 point for a student that got all 4 reporting categories, maybe a half a point for the student that got maybe 3 categories? I mean, numbers are numbers, right? Yeah, it's 80%. Yeah, hopefully we get it to 80%. People feel good, right? It looks familiar, right? It looks familiar. So we want to be careful with those points, but I think this is really the fertile ground opportunity for accountability system in Utah, given where we're at, and I have legislators agreeing, right, that right now is a really good time to explore in the interim, after this session and before the next, what an accountability system really looks like in Utah, with the understanding that we have different things eroding the data and accountability with competing bills, right? And so we're going to explore those as well.
We have 2 accountability systems, and that's really the elephant in the room.
Agreed. And so that's the work that we're working on, right? We have SAFAR, School Federal Accountability Reporting, and Grading Utah Schools, right? And so the idea is if we could bring those together, there's a lot politically at stake. There's a reason we have to, but time heals, and at least at the moment there seems to be like some desire to get it back to the one, and ESA is a good catalyst to promote that change. Right, that's the work of the interim. Yep, we'll. I'm seeing a couple of these as being some stopgaps. There's a lot of hesitancy on the Hill to move forward too fast ahead of what the Fed regs might look like before, during the session. So just a thought. Last one. 201. This actually is teacher evaluations not being able to be tied to end-of-level testing. Working with Representative Polson on this, there's a couple subs. There's sub 1, and there's going to be another sub to this bill. Well, again, with the SSA, what does teacher evaluation look like? Okay, and that's the question that we need to ask. Also, the HQT, highly qualified teacher status, came under No Child Left Behind. We've been under that for like 15 years. Did we get our bang for the buck on that, right? And I'm getting into things with teacher licensure and stuff like that, but it's part of this, okay? We need to pull data to determine, by having a highly qualified teacher status and system in place, what were those are the inputs, right? What are the outputs that we received from that? And explore what that might look like. Same thing with teacher evaluation. Okay, everyone has submitted, all districts and charters have submitted a plan on how they're going to do teacher evaluation. That may include student learning objectives, or SLOs, and or some component of student achievement in the form of growth. Initially, this bill, HB 201, struck all student achievement data from being used for teacher evaluation. Okay, for many that was a bridge too far. That's saying, you know what, that's going too far. A teacher should be on some level held accountable for the time that their students spend in front of them, right? And that's where that 20% of the calculation of teacher evaluation came in anyway. So that was pulled back a little bit, saying, okay, no, you know what, teacher or student learning and student outcomes should be, or should have some part in there. And so Representative Polson pulled back a little bit of that sub 1 and said, you know what, yes, you may still use some aspects of it, but not end-of-level testing for teacher evaluation. The second sub should address that a teacher may choose whether or not they would like to use end-of-level results as part of their evaluation. Right? So we do have some teachers that are saying, you know what, I'm rocking this with my students. Every year my student growth percentiles are through the roof. Why wouldn't I want to include that, right? So a lot of the feedback from the teachers have been, give me the choice. Let me have the choice. And fortunately, there's appetite on the Hill to say, you know what, teach teachers as professionals and let them have the choice. If they want it, that's great. But a school or a district or a charter may not require that they do, is kind of the idea. So it's preserving what Representative Polson wanted to get away from and saying, thou shalt not, right, or you may not, to a teacher may. Okay, so difference of a couple words makes a world of difference. So in a nutshell, those 5 bills really are pressing forward here. As you know, how many bills do we have for education right now? About 100 and I think it's 145. I lost count. I have to look at my spreadsheet this morning and see how many more are added. Right, we have about 150. I'd say upward of 150 bills on education this session. That's a lot. Here are 5 that pertain to this group immediately, but those other 145 will affect the work that you do and the work that teachers do generally and specifically. So get on the Utah Legislature website, identify those bills that have immediate impact that you, your superintendents, your boards have strong feelings toward, and as I said, communicate early and often because this process is oh so quick. And you know, March 10th is right around the corner. I keep saying that every day. In fact, I think in teaching and learning, you know those chains that you create to count down? I think they have one of those. I haven't seen it. You should go up and take a look at it. But it's exciting though too, right? It's exciting. So usually any given bill that comes out right out of the chutes needs some modifications, needs to be polished, right? And that happens from year to year. So obviously bills that we are looking at today are the results of the consequences and unintended consequences from bills in previous years, right? So it's the continual process of redefining and polishing what the public education system looks like in Utah through the legislative process. Any questions? Yes. I'll give you the microphone.
So if, let's say, math teachers want to use the SAGE results for proficiency, as that's the demonstration of proficiency, they're at a 3 or a 4. So the other test that I've got that I'm designing for those that don't take it, those that get a 3 or 4 don't have to take that test. Is that outside what's allowed based on your assessment of the language in the bill, or is that appropriate?
Let me repeat the question just so I see if I understood it correctly. So if a student opts out, okay, students take the SAGE test, okay, and get the 3 and the 4, then do they not have to take? That's a good question. So, yeah, So I'm thinking, right, about this. So the sub hopefully addresses that to 164, particularly in using it for a grade. Because one thing that what was in statute last year wanted to prevent those types of things, because that could be considered a reward or incentive, right? So under the previous statute, that would be thanks but no thanks, you're taking the test, kind of a thing. We'll need to see, as it was shot down 2 days ago, if it wouldn't have been shot down, given the language that was in that one, they may have been able to do that. Okay, with the new sub that I hope to see introduced next week, early next week, we'll see what that language looks like, and that would be able to answer our question. Does it go far enough to, I don't want to say repeal, but redefine what the current statute says regarding that? And at the moment, the answer is no, they can't do that right now. but we'll see how this gets revived and what the verbiage looks like on that. Yep. There's, and just an FYI, we'll be talking about this again. There's a couple more assessment bills that are coming that are protected right now. Can't talk about them. The sponsor doesn't want them to be talked about. He's just soliciting a little bit of feedback regarding them, but it's going to address some other of these types of issues as well. Okay, so it's still early in the session. Deb?
What about the OEK that had the kindergarten assessment? I've heard there's some modifications to that assessment component of that.
See, it's not up here, so I'm not going to talk about it. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. Deb, thank you. I'm totally joking. I know I can joke with you, so thank you. So the OEK, as you know, the board, in one of their board meetings or their committee meetings, they said, you know what, let's put a pause until we see what the session does. And what the OEK and that assessment piece looks like, it's moving through, right? But it's still a little early to determine what that might look like and the funding associated with that. Now, we still keep getting questions regarding what that might look like, and we keep giving them options, right? And hopefully you've seen some of those options. Yeah, there are some vendor-based assessments. There are some district assessments that we could look like. Maybe an OEK that already has school. There are a lot of variables with that, but stay tuned and follow that daily, because as that develops, we want to inform that, and boards and superintendents and yourselves will want to be part of that conversation. It's what that looks like if we're going to move to a statewide OEK expectation or a statewide OEK assessment standardization. Expectation or standardization, right? Do we standardize and have the same one everywhere, or is there an expectation that certain data points are met within a local education agency's purview to design, right? So there's still a few options there. Anything else? All right, sounds good. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. And I appreciate that update, and encourage all of you to get on the website and follow what's happening up on the Hill and weigh in. I think those legislators are really interested in listening to what you have to say, especially educators in the field, and they don't hear often enough from the right people. So we want to make sure that you're involved in that. We added some attachments today, and they're just informational, except for one that has a task attached to it. So I just want to make sure that you have those. This first one is a paper that was published by CCSSO, Achieve, and the Education Council, and it has to do with ESSA and what they believe is going to be guiding principles of that. So as we move forward, I'd like you to be informed. A little light reading that helps put you to sleep at night, but this is really informational for you. The next thing is, as you are talking to your constituents, your communities, and lots of people that maybe understand or don't understand a lot about what happens in assessment in Utah, there's just a little 3-page document here. It talks about what assessment is, what assessment isn't, and why we have it in Utah. These may be some good talking points for you. There's a formative, interim, and summative definitions here that may be helpful, that are in lay terms, plain talk, that will hopefully help you. And then on the last page is what we anticipate will be required under ESSA. So as we move forward, this is what will be required by the federal government in moving forward with our assessments. So we need to be thinking about those. And so we want you to be informed and also be able to talk with some authority in your districts and LEAs and your communities and have those talking points with you. So hopefully that will be helpful. And then one of the other ones is a document that Dr. Phillips put together about Utah accountability measures. And this is a document that's put together for some of our board members, and I thought it might be helpful for you as well. I know we put out things like this from time to time, and it's just maybe helpful for you to have the document in place and be able to use it. Okay, so that's what's attached. A couple of months ago, we were working with the assessment committee of board members, and there was some talk about reducing the amount of testing. And there was lots of options put out, and lots of things that were discussed. And so one of the things that we brought up and said, well, you know, we don't really know a lot about what's happening out there for teachers in LEAs. The state itself doesn't. And so what we would like to do is really kind of think about and be a little bit more careful before we slash and burn or decide not to do certain tests. Or there was a lot of pushback about the writing and different things. And so we began working with West Ed on a project about thinking about the benefits versus burdens of all of the testing that's out there. So we want to understand what's out there. We want to think about the challenges. And as we move forward with accountability systems and with testing statewide over the next couple of years, we want to make sure that we're doing things right. And so the first thing that we did is that we sent out a survey, and we talked a little bit about this. I spoke about it in a couple of memos that I sent out. And so teachers were asked to fill out a survey about the SAGE test, benefits, burdens, how they used it, what the data purposes were. We had almost 4,500 teachers that responded to that survey before we closed it last week. So we will be crunching those numbers and giving you some information back next month about what that looks like and what teachers are actually saying as we move forward in making our decisions. And you are going to be, you have attached, and this is a task that we'd like Utah assessment directors to do, and this is your LEA assessments beyond SAGE. Okay, so it's what's happening in your district. So we want to collect all this information so that we have enough information to inform our state leaders about the directions that we should take. So this is a spreadsheet, and what we're asking you to do is to fill out this spreadsheet and send it back to us. Okay, and it starts with kindergarten. It goes through 12th grade, and it talks about, my glasses, what the assessment is, what's the population that takes this in your district. Is it K1, K2? Is it just your ELL learners? Is it just your special ed? Whatever the testing is. When is your window? Is it required by your district? Or are there just certain schools in your district that are participating in this particular test? And the administration time per student. So that when we get all of this data back together, plus what teachers have said about SAGE, then we can really think about where we need to go going forward. And again, hopefully, as you sit down and think about those assessments that are happening in your district, this may give you a better picture, too, about benefits versus burdens and redundancy in testing and some of those kinds of things when you really sit down and think about what's happening in your district plus what's required by the state. So as we move forward, we really want to have a clearer picture, and hopefully you will have a clearer picture about what's happening statewide. So do you have any questions about that? Hal?
It's a philosophical argument. I mean, I don't know if the data will speak on the larger issues of, like, the state has a role to do this through legislation, and local districts and charters have this kind of role. And so, to me, there's a lot more difference behind the numbers and what's mandated or not. So where's the forum for that discussion with assessment directors and the powers that be? Because my local boards have an opinion on these matters of what is Canyon's versus Alpine's assessment system. And I mean, to me, it's really what's mandated through legislation and then what is in the tool chest of options that are provided by USOE. A tool chest, not a requirement.
Right, but I think, Hal, what we want to really think about is what's being required on a local basis, teacher by teacher, class by class, you know, and at least this will give you part of the picture about what is required and why, and hopefully, you know, you can really think about those philosophical differences between LEAs. And frankly, you know, think about what's been required from, you know, CRTs 10 years ago and what's required now. You know, I really think that this will give us an opportunity to reevaluate what's happening out there in the field, and perhaps give legislatures, you know, when you think about what's state mandated, give them a bit of picture as well. Because a lot of the pushback that legislators hear and that board members here are not state mandated tests. They're what's happening in the district every day. And so we want to begin to have the conversation. The data is a good starting point to start the conversation. And as we move forward with new accountability systems and trying to bring things together, and you know the legislature and what's happening up there right now, and really thinking about what's happening in the interim, that we want some data to give us some perspective, even a starting point for the very conversation that you're talking about. Yes.
I just wanted to say one more thing on this. I was chatting with David Smith yesterday, who said, you know, our district doesn't really require too many assessments, but a number of our schools regularly give, I think DRA was the example. And so in this form, when asked required by, there's an option for LEA and schools, and then there's a percentage of schools that you're guessing, just kind of estimating how many give this assessment, because although there might not be a policy of a mandate or a requirement, we still want to know, you know, 80% of your elementary schools are giving the DRA in addition to the DIBELS, which is the state. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Whitney. You know, and I think that's the point, Hal, is that we want to have a starting point. We want to be able to open that. And I think that if legislators and board members are aware of what's happening in districts, they may back off a little bit on what they're requiring statewide and have some more local control. And we want to be able to shine a lens on that as well. Mm-hmm. Right. Right. And I think this will be a point that we can really shine a light on, and that's what our hope is for the transparency around that. Whoops, did I miss it? Let's see. Oh, we talked about the attachments. And now, Darren, so are there any other questions about what we're asking you to do? So we didn't put a date on this, but I'm asking, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, we can get this back from you. So what's today, the 19th of February? So if you guys, you know, think about the 1st of March being your deadline for this. And I know that it's a burden to ask you to do this, but again, it's important for us statewide, I believe, to have some good ideas about what's happening and some information about what's going on in the field. David?
This is probably for Whitney, but what about SAGE interim? Do you want us to figure out what % of our teachers use or schools use that? And what about the full, like all the interims versus they just use the interim in science or in language? But just approximate that.
Julie, can we don't collect actually data on it, but we can see, I mean, we can run percentages on who used the interim and who didn't. So if you don't want to put that in there, we can still get that information. Yeah. 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 Okay, fine. All right.
Would it make a difference, though, to know if the LEAs are requiring?
I think the issue is more around what are the expectations? Like for assessment to achievement in some of our schools, there's an expectation that you will use some sort of benchmark assessment. It doesn't have to be interim, but we would like to know what that is. So I think there's other purposes for that we'll be able to tell. So yeah, so hopefully that'll give us a little bit more information, and we appreciate it. Julie? Yes, on the question is do we want to fill out CTE, AP tests, and that sort of thing? And we were going to put this on SurveyMonkey, but it ended up being such a bear. And so, but at the very end, yes, we do ask you, you know, who uses AP tests, what kind of AP tests. You know, we want to know all testing that's happening out there in the schools to see what the burden is. So if you would do that, I'd appreciate it. Well, we said a couple of weeks. So, you know, as much as, as fast as you can get it, but we are certainly understanding. We want to have this information ready for what happens in the interim, what happens in the spring, and get that information back to you so that you can start to have those conversations. Any other questions? All right. Darren, do you want to come and talk about assessment to achievement?
Thanks, Joanne. For the past few meetings, we've been mentioning the applications that we've been accepting for assessment to achievement. So we just wanted to give you an update on where all of that fell out. And just as an FYI, I'm spending this week and next week traveling around the state, going to coaching site visits with schools that are participating in assessment to achievement. It's been really amazing to see the growth that the schools and particularly the school leadership teams have made over this past year. We talk a lot about distributed leadership in schools so that initiatives like these have legs and are sustainable over long periods of time. And it's been really amazing to see that leadership growth among the teachers in the school. So that's great. If we can go back to the previous slide, this is cohort 2. Here's cohort 1. These are the schools that are in cohort 1 right now. You can see districts and schools from across the state are in cohort 1. This cohort is working right now and will continue through next school year, the 2016-17 school year. Now, we just kind of cut off the applications for cohort 2. So if you want to advance to cohort 2, we've received applications from all of these districts and charters, and we will be letting those schools and their district leadership teams know about the status of their application by the end of this week. But as you can see from these past 2 slides, we've got schools from across the state representing rural and urban, representing all 4 corners of the state. So this is exciting. Now, funding is guaranteed through year 2 for each cohort. We have the money in the budget to continue these for 2 years. And when funding becomes available, we can continue through 4 years because we know for this cultural change to become sustainable, there needs to be support over more than just a couple of months or a year. So moving forward, that's where we are. Were there any questions about assessment to achievement before I move on to the next item on my agenda? Great. So forward, Kim. Kim and I wanted to talk a little bit about range finding. Now, range finding was a process that we went through with the SAGE writing section of the test. In other words, looking at the range of student responses that would fall into each one of the score points on the domain of the rubric. And the teachers who participated in that process, I believe from your districts and charters, we had teachers from across the state who actually made those range finding determinations as we were doing that for SAGE. And to a person, every teacher who walked out of those range finding workshops said, this is some of the best, if not the best, professional development that I've ever done. To sit down for a number of days with a group of teachers and really examine the standards, examine the rubrics, and look at student writing and see how that plays out was really valuable. And so we wanted to recreate this process. And we also wanted to be able to post examples of student writing online, annotated and scored examples of student writing online that could be used instructionally in the classroom to exemplify the type of writing that the core is pointing towards. And so Kim Rathke and I worked together with a large district in the north part of the state to put together our own range finding project. Starting back in October, we formulated essay writing prompts, SAGE-like writing prompts, and SAGE-like passage sets that followed all the specifications for SAGE in terms of lexile and word count and topics and all of that. Between Thanksgiving and winter break, all of the secondary students in that district wrote essays in response to those prompts under SAGE-like conditions. In other words, they did it online. They were administered following the SAGE TAMs. They were collected online. And then Kim and I put together range finding sets and calibration sets so teachers could get on the same page as far as what a 4 looks like in focus and organization, what a 2 looks like in evidence and elaboration, and so forth. And just last month in January, we put together range finding teams representing each of the grade levels from grades 7 through 11, and they spend a day scoring essays. Right now, we're putting together those essays with their scores and annotation that the teachers wrote, and those will be available online hopefully at the beginning of next month, definitely by the end of March, for anyone to take a look at. We'll have all sorts of different examples of what a 4 looks like, what a 2, what a 3, and what a 1 looks like, and many different approaches that students can take. Now, I shared this information at the state literacy meeting 2 weeks ago. And I got feedback that a number of your districts, well, I think 2 or 3 districts already have done their own range finding because they were so impressed with what happened with the SAGE range finding. But there were a number of other districts who said, Darren, can you do this in my district? I want my teachers to experience this. And what I told them was, I don't know that I have the bandwidth to lead range finding and go out and personally lead it like I did in this particular district, but I absolutely am willing to share with you or the curriculum side of your team, however it works in your district. I'm absolutely willing to share the materials that we developed and help you and collaborate with you in putting together the structures to make this happen, because this was definitely valuable. Now, in doing this, Kim collected some big ideas that came out from grades 7 through 11 as far as where strengths and successes and maybe some weaknesses were with student writing. And granted, this was from one particular district, but having seen range finding from across the state over the past few years, I think this is representative of where students are across the state. So Kim, if you want to speak to that.
Sure. We wanted to focus on the successes as well as the struggles. So that's where we started first. Like, what did you see that everyone was doing well? And so we did get to have a little bit of a celebration that writing instruction is doing better. First thing is that they obviously understand they have to use textual evidence, which 3 years ago was a huge thing. And now everybody gets it. The problem is students are struggling about how to incorporate it. So there's a lot of just plunking in evidence, and they're not sure how to cite it well. And it just sounds like, oh, I cut and pasted this little form. We saw a lot of that. They're also relying only on one source, even when they have and are required to have multiple sources. Remember, this was secondary, so they were supposed to be using more than one, and so they might take one quote out of one article, and then everything else was from another source. So that caused a lot of issues. And the organization is definitely improving, but there's still way too much reliance on like 5-paragraph essay formulaic stuff that is clearly affecting their scoring. They are attempting to address the prompt, but they are struggling to stay on the topic. We see a lot of wavering. And what was surprising to us is we thought we would see that a lot like in 7th and 8th grade, but we were still seeing it in 11th. I mean, enough that it was kind of a shocking, the 11th grade teachers were quite surprised by that. And the big thing is transitions. They're evident, but in their transitions, they're relying really still on elementary-based first, second, in conclusion. There's very little instruction, and that's affecting a lot of scoring, especially in elaboration and organization. Another thing is academic vocabulary is lacking. So what we found with this was, this is a lot of what we're seeing with Utah Compose when people are complaining about scoring as well. This is the difference between editing and revision. And a lot of teachers who've done a lot with online essay scoring have done a lot with editing. Kids are really comfortable with, I'll go change my spelling and fix my punctuation. But when it comes to the revision part, that's where it's really starting to show up. We're also doing this with elementary, by the way. We're working on an elementary group around the state, which we'll have some more reports for you with that as well. 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. And 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th is doing both informational and argumentative. In addition to this, by the way, I put the prompts from the range finding in Utah Compose.
Yeah, they're at state level, so I haven't enabled them yet. But if anybody wants to use them, you can. And Emily is even putting some of the essays in so I can look to see how it's scoring so we can see if it's comparing to our thing, even though the rubric's good writing is good writing. So.
And here's an example of the 9th grade prompt that the 9th grade students wrote to. Sure, so the prompt reads, lawmakers are considering raising the age for legal drivers from 16 to 18. Write an essay for your state legislators arguing whether or not they should change the age guidelines for drivers in Utah. Your essay, now from this point on, this verbiage is exactly what students see on the SAGE writing test. So your essay must be based on ideas, concepts, and information from the Raise the Driving Age passage set. Manage your time carefully so you can plan your essay, write your essay, and revise and edit your essay. Be sure to include a claim, address counterclaims, use evidence from multiple sources. Do not over-rely on one source, and type your answer in the space provided. Now, we do this not so that teachers can teach to the test, right, because we don't want that to happen. But this is an example of the type of writing, that argumentative writing, that your students are going to be doing as they go forward in their college and career pursuits. So we anticipate that this will be a really valuable resource that teachers will be using. I mean, when you think about having not just exemplars of student writing, but actual samples at each of the various levels of development, a 4, 3, 2, and a 1, that's a really valuable resource for teachers to say, well, look, this paper got a 2. What could we do together as a class to turn it into a 3 and then turn it into a 4, right? So it's about developing writing, okay, and moving up that range. Great. Okay, so again, I absolutely encourage you to contact me if you'd like to recreate this process. It was really valuable. All right, I think we're ready to move on to Access, and Jared and I are going to tag team this. I'm actually filling in for Sydney Carter today. Sydney has taken over as the lead on the development and policy side of Access, and Jared is still the technology expert on Access. I'm filling in for Sydney today. So if you want to forward on to the next slide for me. This is the testing schedule. As you all know, we're within the testing window right now. The testing window closes on March 11th. If you still need additional materials, you can order materials up through the week before the close of the testing window. There's a change to the schedule. It used to be that the schedule gave you a week after the close of the testing window to pack up materials, and then at the end of that week, you were to ship those. By the end of that week, you were to ship those materials. They've actually opened up this shipping window to include basically the entire testing window. So if you are already done testing, you do not need to wait until a week after the close of the testing window to ship back those materials. You can pack them up and ship them now. Okay, get them out of your hair. That's the date they'll all be received at DRC, given that you ship them by this date. It's really important that you do get those materials shipped by the 18th of March. There are a number of steps that have to be taken, and there's a schedule for those steps in order for us to receive our reports online and printed by this date. And all of the state's materials have to be processed at the same time. So even a lag of a few days from one district on shipping these back could move back the entire state's reporting window. And then in April, you will have 2 weeks to take a look at some pre-report data to make sure that student names and other information like that is correct. Okay, question, Emily? So first question was, do we ship by school? The process is the same as it has been in previous years. The expectation is that this will all be done at the district or at the LEA level and then sent back to DRC. And the other question was, Yes. So the question was, do we ship unused testing materials in the same way? Yes. There are guidelines for returning all the materials that came, printed guidelines that came with all of those boxes that you received already. And there are videos on the WIDA website that walk you through the packaging and return process. So that's all very explicitly laid out. And if you are having problems finding those directions or the videos, let me or Sydney or Jared know, and we can point you to those. Questions about the timeline? Yeah, Deb.
Follow up to that question about by school. So we understand that we'll do it at the district level, but if we have schools that are finished, do you want us to wait and do all schools at once or multiple times?
As I understand it, the preference is to ship it all back at once. Great. Other questions on the timeline? Okay, Jared has some updates on technology.
So yesterday we had an ALS meeting, and some of you were there, and there were lots of questions about Access 2.0 and some of the issues that have come up. One of the requests was to, now that we've showed you these dates and talked about them, one of the requests was to possibly extend the window. We're trying to find out from DRC how that would affect everything downstream. But we're wondering here what your thoughts are, whether you think, oh, and Julie has a...
So we tried to be high-tech and see if we don't mess it up. Emily, could you pull that first? Yeah, that one. So for those of you online, and can you make that bigger so they can see? Oh, looky there. So this is the question, and as Jared said and Darren indicated, there could have, likely will have delays with reporting if we shift the testing window. That's just how this works. But there seems to be enough concern with the clumsiness of the Access 2.0 system, and believe me, Jared and Sid were great to hold DRC's feet to the fire yesterday about the concerns we've had on the help desk and the TSM, and Jared's going to talk more about all of that. But so here's the question. So for those of you in the room, I need a 1, 2, or 3. Can you use your fingers really big so we can count since I don't have you clicking? So here's the question. Extending the Access 2.0 testing window 1 week is critical for my LEA? Like critical for my LEA. That's a 1. It would be a nice to have. That's a 2. Or it doesn't make any difference to me. That's a 3. Can you hold up your fingers? Like critical means like the reports would be useless to us pretty much because we didn't get enough kids tested kind of thing. Does that change anyone's 1, 2, or 3? Because we're trying to weigh the risk of giving more time to test versus having those reports, you know, that week. Okay, you're still thinking, Alpine, you can't not vote. Okay, so ones, hold your fingers up for ones. We'll all, so there's a couple. 0's not an option. 1, okay. So there's 2, 1s. Okay. Who are 2s in the room? Would be nice to have, but not a deal breaker. Okay, some of you. So a bunch of charters that Justin's representing. Okay. And makes no difference. Okay. Tori's helping me count here. We'll add that to the online. Yeah. All right. So Alpine is considering their issues. Okay, good. There's 98 people logged in online, and there are only 40-something votes. So if the rest of you online could vote, we can consider your point. It could be multiple people. So yeah, 1 per LEA would be nice. So Alpine only gets to vote once. So if they get around to voting, it's coming. Do that. Oh, Alpine, yeah, you're being prompted. Sid is telling you Alpine vote's critical. Please tell David Smith. Yeah. So there's back-ordered stuff, and we know that. So we're trying to figure out, dude, what do we do with this? Okay, Alpine votes 1. So we've got 5, 6 LEAs saying it's supercritical. Okay, we're going to take that feedback and go back and start horse trading with DRC. Because we know, I mean, they own that, I think I've used the word clumsy, catastrophic, disastrous. What were they thinking? Overwhelming, all those good adjectives.
And all of a sudden we're like trying to get supplies. It has to do with like, I can get it down to an incredible level. I have pressure always of like 100% ELD tested kids. And so any of these supply things, it's around that. That's why kind of related to it to a certain extent with these moving kids. If you can say, here's the date, and if they don't have their initial placement, districts aren't accountable to test kids. You've done it. It's always the last thing to think of. But a complementary issue is if you could tell us when we're not responsible for new moving kids as large districts, that would help us relieve pressure.
Okay, thank you, Hal. We will note that. Okay, we will note that, and we will get something definitive out to you unless Darren wants the microphone and he wants to answer that question. It's at what point do they not have to test kids who move in?
Sorry, we were conferring about testing materials. So the guidelines that we've said that we've set in previous years was 2 weeks before the close of the testing window. Oh, absolutely. Okay, we can do that right away.
Yeah, thank you, and please make sure we are getting you those policy issues firm because a lot of this has been squishy. So I'm going to go back to my computer and write that down right now. And I'm going to hand the microphone back to Jared. Thanks for participating in our poll. Excellent. Thank you, Justin. Justin's in the room making snarky comments online. Thank you, Justin. That's just awesome. Okay, fair enough. We've got some, okay, we will read those comments. Thank you. Keep chatting online if you've got additional comments to add. Send us some emails if you change your mind, you know, related to this topic. We're trying to just balance that, you know, the risk of where we're at. Here, take the microphone from me.
Okay. Let's see. So to talk a little bit about it, we'll move, let's see. Can we? Yeah, I think we've got that down. I'm pointing this. Okay, so this, I'll put this down. So the next two slides, actually next 3 slides, I had set up yesterday, ready for this meeting, and then things have changed. So that's what, hence my paper right here. So there is one issue that was talked about yesterday was back-ordered materials, which I understand should be delivered yesterday, whether that happens or not. The other issue is with the TSM server. So they've sent out an optional upgrade to that TSM server. Optional being the key word, with you deciding if it's worth the risk or not. So a couple things that have been problems, and I have, sorry to look here, but one is that the content files, when they download to the TSM, sometimes they're not downloading the full file. It's either a partial or it's corrupted in some way. You would know this. You'd be seeing errors. The student would be ejected from the test with no error message, or an error retrieving content from the TSM, or an internet connection error. That's one issue that's been taking place. The other one is speaking. So students from what I understand, large speaking files the TSM is having difficulty encrypting those and sending those back to DRC. So again, a bunch of error messages are coming out. And let's see, the page flashes, but nothing happens. So it's supposed to be sending the content that the students, their responses back to DRC. It doesn't seem to be doing that. Nothing seems to be changing. An error pop up saying there was an error connecting to DRC. So some of these issues. So the recommendation that DRC has sent out is if you haven't started testing yet, their recommendation is to upgrade, to update the TSM. If you have started testing, then you're going to decide, okay, have we had some really major problems? Do we need to upgrade our TSM, or can we get by, or have we, we haven't noticed any issues? We had several people yesterday kind of in all three categories. So what, I guess, we've been talking this morning, Julie and I, on how to handle this. Rather than send this all to everyone, if you are having some major issues with the TSM and having some problems getting your students tested, please email me at jared.wright@schools.utah.gov, and I will send you the document I'm holding here. It has instructions on what to do, how to take care of everything. No, we're not. Probably similar to us. There have been some issues with many things in this test administration that we've been working with DRC through. This is just one. So, any questions on that? Okay, you can just let me know if you would like the instructions on taking care of that. Again, the upgrade's optional. It doesn't need to be done, and it creates quite a pain right in the middle of testing with a lot of risk possibly involved. Okay, we'll move. So maybe you do it for me, yeah. So if you'll just go, okay, so this one also changed. I had a great screenshot yesterday. Look, excellent. Is there a way we can click on the link at the bottom and have that come up without disrupting too much? No? Okay. If you're able to online, if you could type in and go to the Access 2.0 preparation resources, you'll notice that the screen has changed on me from over the night when I woke up. What I wanted to point out here is that if you're thinking about using the TSM, there is a webinar today. Let me look at those are Central Time, so what, 12 noon here. There is a TSM webinar. They essentially, I listened, they had some yesterday. They go through this document and talk about why or why not you might want to upgrade. They also take questions if you have those. This is also a great resource. Fridays are focused on the tech side, and then Mondays and Wednesdays they have Q&A sessions throughout the window. So if you're not using this, this is a great time to be able to get DRC and WITA online and be able to ask some of those questions. Let's see, let's move to the next. Okay, any questions about the Access 2.0 before I move on to ACT? So, are there any online? No? Okay, so ACT, this is short. I just wanted to bring up this because I think there could be confusion. So this next week, they're sending out an email talking about that they're upgrading, or not upgrading, they're changing the design and the look of the state ACT test, not test, website. They're just, now the reason I think confusion can come up is because if you go to the state ACT website, at the top is a little button that says, well, I put it here, I can't read it from there even, preview our new site. So you click on that, you go to the new site. It has nothing about Utah. This is just, I guess, from what I understand as I've tried to get more detail, it's just how it's going to look and function, but it doesn't have the Utah content on there yet. And we asked them about it. They didn't want us to share that with you yet, but it will be there coming within the next couple weeks. The site will change over, but just so you know, because when I looked at it, I had some questions. Yeah, and it will change before. March 7th? Okay. I will send that, well, yeah. Oh, I understand what you're saying. I will send that. I wish I could control it like that. But I will send that feedback back and say, please put this. Yeah, I'll have Joe Allen. I totally understand that, and that's one of my big questions. Not only does it look different, when you look here, and it's available now. I looked at it yesterday, and what are people going to think? I think that's why I'm bringing it up. I think there's going to possibly be some questions. Right now it's just so you can see the look of how it's going to look. It doesn't have the content from Utah. So just so you're aware, and I will definitely get that back to ACT, that, you know, hold off till even the 15th maybe after the whole thing. Right. Definitely. I understand that. Now the bottom part.
There was a question from Emily first. Is the Plan and Explore going to be paid for by the state next year? That first question, there is no, this is the last year of Plan and Explore. ACT has phased out Plan and Explore. So I hope that answers that question. Do we have an administration date for 2017 yet? And it's always the first Tuesday of March. So that's what's going to be the state test. We're in negotiations with ACT right now for our 11th grade test next year. So, you know, that's, you know, just plan on that. Also, they're offering either an online or a paper pencil option. So we'll get with you. So I want you to be thinking about next year if you want to do an online option or a paper pencil. So it depends on your computer lab, your space, how you want to do it. If we do an online option, there will be a window rather than just one day. So I'll get you that information as soon as we complete those negotiations. Question? Hal's asking if it can be school by school or is it by district, and I don't know the answer to that. I'm assuming you're going to have to make a choice, probably by LEA, but I don't know that yet. Question? No, they're not right now. But the ACT is looking at a study for a new assessment that they're going to be giving in 10th and 11th grade that I'm sure will come at a price should Utah choose to participate. And right now we do not have the appropriation for an additional test. So right now for Utah, it will be the ACT only in 11th grade. Any other questions about ACT? Okay. And then one of the questions, so I'll just go ahead and talk about this just for a minute before we answer the questions online. We've had some people ask us, and I guess, and I wasn't actually aware of this, but ACT has a writing portion to it. And Utah as a state has not participated in the writing portion. It's an additional $15 per student. However, when a student applies to certain colleges, this college requires, and if they want the highest score, they require the writing portion of the ACT, and ACT will not superscore those tests together if they were taken on different dates. So kids have to go and participate in another ACT that offers the writing portion. So beginning next year, ACT will offer the option for students to take the writing portion on the same day and with the writing. Now, or with the Utah administration, statewide administration. The problem with that is that districts and LEAs would have to enter those separately. You'd have to collect the money yourselves, then they would bill us, and then we would have to collect the money from you. Well, the problem with that is that we do not have a mechanism at the state to collect the money from LEAs. So we're talking with them about different options. One option right now, and I know this may be not the greatest option, but one of the options that we're considering is that if a student wants to take the writing, and I'm not sure how many of your students will want to opt into that anyway, they will know, if they're trying to apply to a college that requires that, but they could let you know ahead of time, and ACT could offer them a voucher to take the test on another day that already offers the writing portion. So right now, that seems the best way for us to handle this, but ACT is working on a way to, kids can register online for any of those other administrations, so my question back to them is, why can't you just register the kids online? They pay ACT and, you merge data on the back end, right? We do that all the time. But evidently their systems are not set up yet that way. So Colorado's trying it this year. They're going to do a couple of different things, and then they'll offer this to us next year. So when we get a little bit closer, we'll give you some more options. But right now, the voucher thing seems like the best option so that kids can participate in that writing portion. Hal? Mm-hmm. So having a voucher, yeah. At this point, for us not to, and then, the problem is collecting money from you guys. We just can't do that. So we'll work through some of those issues going forward and kind of see, and hopefully they'll have some better solutions within a year. Some of the data sources with ACT are a little bit antiquated. Okay, yes. The ACT Aspire test, and we do have some people across the United States that are participating in that, but that is another test that would be sort of end-of-level test, so it would replace the SAGE, and again, like Rich mentioned this morning, it doesn't align to our standards, and the cost is really prohibitive. So we have not moved in that direction at all statewide to use those Aspire tests. And that's really all I can say about that right now. Okay? Any other questions about ACT? Okay. Let's see what's next. Jared, is it back to you? Oh, great.
Love it. Okay, is that working? That'd be good. All right. Just one comment with what Hal asked. This year, at least, when I talked with ACT about online, it was school to school or site to site, based on whether they could choose online or paper pencil. Right, right, and that's how it's been this past year, from what I understand. Okay, so as far as SAGE, the known issues, we're trying to keep you apprised of what's happening. There's 4 that we're aware of currently. I always have the good news, don't I? So that's really small to see. The first one is, and many of you have probably experienced this, you're going into ORS to look for interim scores for reading and writing, and you're not seeing anything for students. They haven't had enough items, is what it says, too few items. The issue here is a student took only one of the reading or the writing in the fall, the interim. Then they take in the winter they take the tests, and for some reason it's trying to merge the fall with the winter and confusing those two. So I've included, hopefully it's somewhat helpful, but they're working on this. We want to try and make sure AIR lets us know what's going on. So that's being worked on currently. The scores are there. They're just merging incorrectly.
I had that problem, but I didn't know what the root cause was. And just yesterday I got an email from Robin saying that my problem has been solved. So it may be that they have a solution, assuming that that's why mine did that. So.
Oh, good to, good to know. They were hoping it would be. So hopefully that's the case. The other one, second on the list, Chrome version 47 is, I don't know why it's Chrome, but text-to-speech is garbly, and there's some other tracking issues. I've listed them here. There's 5 different things going on with Chromebooks. I've also tried to include the only thing version 48 corrects is the garbled speech in the text-to-speech. Some of the others they're hoping will come out in a future version, either 49 or 50. And right now, as you can see, well, maybe you can't see, it's even hard here. There's not a workaround for this as far as the text-to-speech, other than it reduces the garble. iOS 9 we've talked about in the past. It's not high on their priority to fix. It's the sharing feature, which can be disabled if you're using iPads when the test administrator gets in the MDM. The last one we just found out on Tuesday. For some reason, in the full reporting interim, specifically math and reading, they didn't give us a grade. So I'm not sure which grades this affects, whether it's all or a few. But students have been able to come back the next day and get back into the questions that they answered the previous day. So the 20-minute pause rule for those tests is not working. So they're looking into that. And at this point, no solution. They're just trying to correct it. Any questions on the known issues? Okay, moving on. I wanted to give you the upcoming dates for the spring. So the interim and the mid-year summative test window will end March 4th. Then the system will be offline. So on the right, we've included the offline maintenance windows, and then on the left are the dates for when the windows are open. We included this. Very Christmassy. Yeah, I need to figure out something else with go and stop or something. So the red are dates when the system is offline. The green is when, sorry, not the system, when testing, the test delivery system is online. So the green is when testing can take place. The red is when the test delivery system is offline. And then the stars, the reason for those is we wanted to give you kind of an example of what a LAA testing window might look like. And a few things that aren't included that may be a question. They have been in the past. For example, April 4th to the 8th may be a spring break for your LEA. It's still included within that 8-week window. And you'll notice there are some white squares with yellow question marks, which Julie's going to talk about.
All right, friends, here we are. This is the other poll, Emily, if you could drag that in. Okay, so we have a little wrinkle in our deployment schedule for this spring. You know, we have this legislative requirement to have parent review of our tests before they go in front of kids. There were some issues beyond our control which have delayed that activity, and there's one downstream effect because of that. That maybe we might have to take the system offline for one day during the spring testing window. So we are doing everything possible, and AIR is on board to minimize that impact and literally do everything possible to not have a day of downtime. But we need to prepare for a day of downtime should we not be able to mitigate the impact of this legislatively required activity and its complications. So here's the question. So this is a 1 or a 2. Thanks for using the appropriate fingers, by the way, on the last poll in the room. Yeah, there you go. So which day is the best day to have a Sage outage, knowing that there is no good day? These are our options, April 8th or April 15th. I'm hoping that a whole lot of you have spring break on one of those days. So a 1 is April 8th, a 2 is April 15th in the room. Those of you online, if you could select one of those options. 1 is April 8th. That's is anyone in this room not April 8th is the best day? Yeah, the earlier the better, we know that, but April 8th, I mean, we tried to maybe look at April 1st, but it's too risky to have everything in place to pull the system offline at that day. So the 8th is the earlier, the better. Okay, does anyone in this room not vote for April 8th? Okay, and there's a couple online, yeah. Okay. So if everyone could have spring break the same week, that would be terribly helpful for us. You could all just go back and work on that. That would be really awesome. Because I was hoping that a lot of people would be out on April 8th. So we will keep you posted on the development that this has. It looks like right off the cuff, it's a pretty safe bet to plan on removing April 8th from your testing schedules locally. And you know, whatever that means, let us know, and all of that. But probably plan on that now, and then we will keep you posted on what occurs and develops with that. Okay, Jared, go ahead. Oh, do I? Really? Okay, so let's move that out. Maybe. Oh, okay, so this is a related question, and there were a couple of questions online to this effect. So we've been asked, what are the 2016, 2017 testing dates? All right, friends, we haven't even done this year yet, okay? So depends on if we have to redo the tests again. There's always complications after a testing cycle that could impact the next year's testing schedules. But if there are things locally that you are concerned about with testing calendars in general, if you could let Jared or I know that, the sooner the better, as we are building next year's testing calendar, that we can keep things in mind and take into consideration. So basically, those 2 pages that Jared just referenced, if you have any heartburn with how any of that's been done, let us know. And we don't have much control over ACT, but everything else, we kind of have some flexibility. So let us know. And then we will try and get the 2016, 2017 schedule posted as soon as we have sign-off from all of our vendors and all of that. That's not going to happen before, probably April-ish at the earliest, maybe even into May. So I know you're trying to build your next year's schedules. We just don't have everything yet. But let us know if there's anything you want us to consider. Is that it? Oh, that was the date. There you go. There's the slide for my poll. So there we are. Okay, who's this? Yes, question. That's coming shortly. Yes. Okay, here we go. Who's doing this one? David. All right.
Oh, good. Thank you. All right. So similar to Jared's bearing of bad news, Well, here's the issues we know that are going on at USOE regarding getting students into SAGE. So basically, you send us your upload from Utrex. We process it a little bit. One of the things we've been trying to do is with foreign exchange students and English language students, English learners, we've been trying to create a pseudo-dual enrollment for them. So the tests will appear under an LEA, which is 00 in TIDE, which is just something we made up. It's not an actual LEA. But then there should also be a row there for your LEA indicating that the student is enrolled there. This has been working hit or miss in a lot of cases. Like some places I'll look and it's working fine, other ones it's inconsistent. So we've been working with our IT team to get that fixed so that it always works correctly. Another big one that we're aware of, and I know they're working on, is 12th graders are not supposed to be assigned 11th grade English tests. A lot of them are making it through into TIDE anyway, so that's one we're working on. And supposedly also, if a student is flagged as 1%, they shouldn't be going into TIDE whatsoever. They should be going to DLM. That has not been working 100% either. So those are ones that I basically want to let you know that we are aware of. If you have any examples where you see it, just know, okay, the state already knows about it, but you're still more than welcome to send me the SSIDs of the students in question. It's always good for us to be able to test cases to make sure, okay, the system now appears to be working, or, right, we think we get it fixed, and then you send an SSID, and it's like, oh, no, this one's not working. Let's figure out why. And again, if there's any other issues that might come up, and hopefully they won't, but they do, please contact me. Let me know exactly what's going on. Again, it's always best to have an SSID. I do get emails very often where they say, like, oh, some teacher has an issue with a student and they can't test. And it'd be like, okay, well, could you tell me who the teacher is? Could you tell me what the SSID is? Could you just, the more specific information you can give in the email, the easier it is for me to be able to quickly look it up and start researching it. Okay, so the other thing I wanted to talk to related to SAGE is the special codes tool that we've been saying for several months would be ready around February. And it's February, and it's almost ready. We have the, in our development website version of Data Gateway, we have basically everything laid out. We just need to start getting the data into it and be able to test that everything works once we have the actual special codes data in. And then at that point, we should be able to let it go live and let you start using it. One issue that has come up, though, regarding that data is at the time, AIR is not able to send us a nightly file of the special codes. So basically what we have arranged with them to do is starting on March 1st, they will be sending us every special code in TIDE on a monthly basis, which I think will be okay at first, since, again, I imagine between March 1st and April 1st, the amount of testing where this is going to be greatly affected is going to be minimal, right? And remember, we wanted to catch a lot of those cases of trimester or accelerated courses that finished early, and you'll be able to do that once we get them. That's the question. This new tool will allow for a batch upload of special codes. Yes, yes, it will. I wanted to demo it, but I also see we really don't have that much time, and also I'm having some issues with my login to that website anyway. So, in the interest of time, I'll just say yes, it's pretty great. You can select a date range and say anyone who's in this date range, you could set a special code for all of them, which would be a great time saver. So anyway, starting on March 1st, we will be receiving a monthly special code update file. And then from May 15th to June 5th, which is the period where we expect there to be a large number of tests being taken, AIR has agreed to send us a nightly file then. So part of the idea is, again, that we weren't expecting you to be using this tool on a daily basis anyway, that we figured there would be strategic times, like right before you know that a school was going to start its testing window, or right when the testing window ended, where you'd want to go in and see what is in there and start setting special codes as needed. So that is my update for that. That's where we are at. Are there any other questions regarding that? I assume that probably sometime within the next couple of weeks, once the tool is ready to be released to you all, either in an AD meeting or some other format, we'll really show it to you and train you on how to use it and not break things. Yes. He asked, the question was, is this the data cleanup? Right. The idea would be that what the cleanup would be you would just select a date range and set a code that says everyone who was before my window opened. Obviously, there was no way I could have tested them. So if anyone who is in that range, you would just say, you'd set the code, I think it's 108 student transferred out if they exited at that point, and then it would be set for every single student, whether it was 3 weeks or a couple of months. If they, yeah. Right. Yeah. And again, that idea of the bulk setting, so you won't have to be going in one at a time. You could very easily, there's several filters on it that will hopefully make it a lot easier for you to be able to do things quickly. Okay, and I'm getting the speeded up, so I'll take one more question. That is the idea, but as with all things in Data Gateway, if you have that level of access, you can give permissions to people beneath you. We're kind of expecting that, especially with larger districts like Alpine or Jordan, where you're assigning that off anyway. Okay, some DLM updates that I need to give quickly. So the spring testing window is from March 21st to June 10th. Was this my slide to give, or was this yours, Tracy? Okay, Tracy's going to come up. I can read that date because it's in bold. And it's just because I see the second bullet point, and it's like, I don't think I wrote that one. So.
I'm Tracy Gooley, by the way. I just want to introduce Tracy Gooley. She's our new special ed assessment person. So all of those good DLM questions will come to Tracy. Her email and her contact is right here. And we want to welcome her to the USOE.
Don't go to me.
Send those to David.
So spring window for DLM opens March 21st. So what we're calling our ITI or interim mid-year, whatever you're calling the mid-year window, closes February 29th. So just keep that in mind. David was talking about special codes with SAGE. We also have special circumstance codes with DLM this year as well. And those are only accessible to building test coordinators, district test coordinators, and the state people. So your teachers will not be able to go in to DLM and elect those special codes. So for reasons why a student may not be testing. Okay? And you can find those in Educator Portal under the drop-down window, same place that you can find your tips. The next slide.
Okay. So one other thing before that the big testing window opens that DLM has requested is that we essentially have a data lockdown where we're able to clean up the data, and So before the testing, there's not a lot of issues with data changing. So they gave us some dates. The first is so that teachers should have their data cleanup finished by February 29th, district staff by March 2nd, and the state we have until March 10th. Okay. So during this lockdown period, you won't, teachers and district level staff won't be able to make changes. You'll have to contact me if any changes need to be made. With that said, I've been doing so much work on DLM as of late because it's hard to get that data in there for some reason. And especially because suddenly people become really interested when there's a deadline of February 29th, when you have until then to test. Suddenly districts are contacting me with, hey, the correct teacher isn't in here. You're putting the student's homeroom teacher, not their actual teacher. The reason is because we are pulling this data from UTREX, which does not always, unfortunately, reflect the reality of 1% students. So with that said, and I've mentioned it a couple times before, you need to contact me in those cases to request an override. The override form is different than last year. It actually kind of functions as a report. You can see here is all of the students that are being pulled from your LEA. Here is the teacher they're being assigned to, and then you can put in basically if there's a different teacher that should be there, and then I can get that into the system. And one other really important thing regarding that is in order to get a teacher into the system, they have to have their email address in there. And the state does not keep teacher email addresses on file. You may have gotten contacted from me either over MoveIt or through an email requesting teacher email addresses. These are ones that I'm trying to get the students into Kite, but I can't because the teacher they're assigned to does not have an email address on file. Or what it often is they're not the teacher who should be there. They're the homeroom teacher for the student or something like that. And the actual teacher for DLM in that school has an account. I just don't know because I haven't gotten the override. So again, any questions regarding that, please contact me. I want to do everything I can to get the correct students into the system for you.
And one more thing with the lockdown. During the lockdown, before the spring window opens, really one of the only things that DLM has requested that we be able to change during that time is just simply adding a new student. So they are not going to allow us necessarily access to come in and change what is already in there with a student during that lockdown, because the purpose of that lockdown is for them, they're going through and assigning essential elements now and taking your mid-year testing and getting your spring window stuff set up. So if we are making changes to that during that lockdown time, it could mess up your testlets and your information for students.
Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Todd to talk about math.
Okay, thanks, David. I do appreciate my presentations are quite a bit easier now that I switched positions. Okay, so math updates. Essentially, we have added a new item format to the test. Questions in this format will be piloted this year. They'll go live next year. It's the geometry proof type. It is only going to affect the high school test. So we have updated the training test to add one question that's similar to anything students would see. They then added a question 1 and 2 rather than question 32 and 33. So if teachers wanted to go in and look at them, they just have to look at the first 2 questions rather than put in a fake answer to get all the way to the end. If teachers have some type of a format that they've been using with their students where they've given like an answer key for students to put in, just let them know that there's 2 questions at the beginning now, so they'll need to update those. Just so you can see, we're not going to go over them. These are what the 2 questions look like. Question 1 is a 2-column proof. Essentially, there's a set of things in this area that they would just need to drag into the blanks in the table. Question 2, question 2 is a 1-column proof. Same thing. They're just dragging things in. And that's the whole thing. So we'll turn it into Whitney.
Thanks, Todd. Okay, I wanted to talk just for a minute or two about ESSA. Next AD meetings, we'll have this a little more in depth because next week, going to a conference that will explain a little more detail what this is. But just so you know, okay, Joellen added these pictures. There are some key changes to ESSA than our current system. Mainly, the feds are giving us a little more local control. That's generally what people say. Also, a lot of programs are being consolidated, and a lot of the measures that we have are also being consolidated. I think they're hearing back from us that we are tired of giving many different reports that say the same thing. Let's see. This is just some information that we need to have rigorous standards, but that the Secretary at the federal level will not require standards to be submitted for approval. So about the same thing, and then we've kept the information or the requirements on the 95% participation rate. And I'm going through these pretty quickly, but you're welcome to go back and read through them. Just so you know, Dr. Nye talked about that this next year we have a transitional year. Our ESEA waiver ends August 1st. We have a transition year, and then 2017-2018 is where the rubber meets the road. David Smith was talking about ACT points. We discussed changing those for this year, but because of this larger change with ESSA, we decided to make those changes all at once so that we have at least a consistent year twice in a row. But legislative session isn't over with, so who knows if that's going to happen. These are some changes to federal accountability. He talked about, Dr. Nye talked about these new ones. 4 being English language proficiency will be included in the model, as well as the, what did you say, magical beast or unicorn. And next week I'll be learning a lot more about this 5th indicator that I'm excited about, because I don't think states know what they're going to do. Let's see. There's 2 levels of intervention. The same. It's very similar to the current system. And there's this website that you can receive updates weekly or whatnot. For me, it's nice to know kind of an overarching way that the federal government is going, because the way that they're going is the way that the states are going to be going, and so it's good to have a pulse on what they are up to. Oh, that's cute. Any questions about that 3-minute ESSA? Okay. Data Gateway updates. Aaron.
But that's the time, right? I get 2 minutes. Okay. There's a new report out there for the special ed. You will all have access to this. It was automatically put inside of there. So if you go into the Data Gateway, click on Tools. Under Special Ed, it says Assessment Comparison. What this does currently is it allows you to see a breakdown between, in the first column on the left, will be the SAGE results excluding all special ed students. The middle column is the special ed students who took the SAGE test. The last column will be the DLM or the UR. Again, to access this one, it's inside of My Tools, Assessment Comparison. If your assessment directors have questions, they will be coming to you to get access to this. You do have the rights to assign this. We will be meeting with the assessment directors in a couple, not the assessment directors, sorry, the special ed directors. I'm with you right now. And April, I think, is when we're doing that. We'll be talking about how to use this report. Again, it's pretty self-explanatory at the moment. It's not really difficult. As you drill down into a district, just realize the difference or the nuances inside of here because of the difficulty of comparing the UA or the DLM to the SAGE, it is grouped by grade. So this is not by test subject. So you're not going to, if you go up in the high school and say, hey, I'm comparing, for example, physics against something else, it's just all grouped together by grade as it does on the front page inside of the SAGE reports. Couple things to note inside of there. Again, it tells you it's grouped by grade. Also, you'll need to hover over to get the end size. I couldn't display it just because of the way it works, but you will see the end size. If it's less than 10, it will be in red. So for example, this one right here, even though that they're 100%, there's only one student. You can only see this securely logged in. No, it'll tell you the exact number. It's going to say it will say it's 5 or 1 or 2, whatever it is. On every column, it'll tell you how many are in there. Yeah, if it's less than 10, it'll be in red. That's just kind of the warning. Don't make judgment calls on that one. Okay? Any questions on this report? The request from special ed is they like to actually drill further into it and get to the student list. That's probably a next year update that we'll get to. Functionality change. Not growth, just proficiency. The question that came out is some people are looking at the reports and saying, hey, what about this kid? They transferred out a while ago. We talked with IT about, well, we can easily remove them from your list, but then there are other implications such as, you know, over the summer, you would lose everything, and you couldn't go and look up any student unless you were submitting your UTRACs. And so the idea was we'll still leave them in there. So if a student was in your class, but they have transferred, they're grayed out. You can easily download that sheet. And so here's just an example where I went in there and said, these were grayed out here. I removed them. I recalculated the teacher scores down at the bottom, and they get a different view of what's going on inside of there. But remember, if you're trying to get to some level of accountability on the MGP for a teacher, don't use the current student or the last year setting. Use the link to teacher. That is the closest one we have currently to the accountability system. Again, we are working on one with licensure, teaching and learning to actually define exactly what they want in there. Again, depends on what legislation does too, with with the teacher evaluation, what's going to happen inside of there. I believe that's all I have. I do have one thing from the IT. If you want a SURF file, you can request it anytime. All you need to do is call the help desk number. If you can't remember what the help desk number is, go to the Data Gateway, scroll to the bottom, it's right there. It's 801-538-7800. So again, if you want a SURF file at any time, all you have to do is call that number. Any questions or feedback? Okay.
All right. We're 3 minutes over. I tried to get you out right on time. So thanks for the team that kind of sped things up. We appreciate you coming today. Please make sure that you look at all of the PowerPoints and the attachments. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email myself or any of the team or call us, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions. And really appreciate your participation today. So thanks so much. Appreciate you guys. Yes. Question? Oh, Tori said don't forget to sign the sign-in sheet on your way out. We need to know who is in attendance today. So thank you so much for doing that. Okay, thanks.